Hello, everyone. It's Dagmar Bryant and Nathalie Cordell is here with me today for our another video in our series on how we are looking at how our life has changed as we move into a certain age, a certain time, as we move into a time of transformation. And today we are talking science, soul, and the space between. Let me introduce Nathalie. Nathalie, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my pleasure. And thank you for having me, Dagmar. I know we met serendipitously, if that's the word. And so it's really good to talk to you today. So just a little bit about myself and what brings me here. I've had a background in pharmaceuticals. I spent 21 years, I think, in the end in corporate pharma. And about 2018, I started to really wonder about my what's next, my purpose, and I discovered coaching and a particular psychology called psychosynthesis, which is a psychospiritual psychology. And that it's been a long journey, which I'm sure we'll go into today. But that really led me to retrain, do a master's in psychosynthesis coaching, and eventually leave my corporate job about 4 years ago and start a new journey of setting up a coaching business. I coach midlife women who are in transition. I think that's really my passion. I do lots of other things as well. I would say my sweet spot is coaching people in transition. And I also write. So I write a um, blog, newsletter, whatever you want to call it, a community, Soul Seeds on Substack. And I've also, for the last 2.5 years, been writing a book, which just published back in April.
Yay, that's awesome. Love that. And I think one of the great things was when we connected, we talked about having that background in quite a conventional kind of um, degree course, you talking about your science background, me talking about law, and how we've adapted as we've moved both into that coaching space. For those of you who know me, I'm host of the Angelic Footprints podcast, and I have also a school group with a free course connecting with your angels that can potentially lead into a 2-day workshop and also a longer term coaching program. Again, like Nathalie, very much helping women of an age where they are in that space of transition and wanting to have some transformation in their life, which I guess brings us to the topic of today, how when you have that space, you get to that certain space where what you have achieved no longer meets the criteria of what you thought that you wanted, how that can affect our identity and how we might get a sense that we're losing our sense of self.
Mm.
Nathalie, what would you say to women in that space who find themselves unsure of their next steps?
Mm. The first thing, which is what I needed to hear too, is that you're not going mad, because my experience of, but I called it midlife because I think that's usually when it happened. But midlife for me probably started in my mid 30s, and I've met women who are going through this, as late as mid 60s. So it's quite a broad church, if you see what I mean. But it's that point in life where we've grown, we've done the surviving, the finding ourselves, our identity, our place in the world, in the material world. So, putting a roof over our head, contributing in it, is we do need to do that. But it's almost, we've ticked all the boxes, and yet that sort of everlasting fulfillment, the happily ever after, as I call it, just doesn't materialize. To me, it was that feeling of just achieving, always looking at what's next, achieving, thinking that will get me something. And finding that, yes, there was satisfaction in it, but it never lasted forever. And there would be something else, another discontent coming. And at the time, I felt that, well, if I'm discontented, it must mean that there's something wrong with my life or with me, sort of looking for a fix. When actually what I've learned is that there's nothing wrong. It really is a message. It's just your soul knocking on the door saying, "Come on, what's next?" And the discontent or the longing is actually pointing towards either a part of you, it could be a part of you that you've repressed. So for me, that's what it was. It was actually there was a big part of me that I had shut down. Actually, the spiritual part, the one that believes in magic and angels and all that side of things, or a part that needs expressing. So it's not actually something going wrong. It's actually something going right. It means you've achieved enough safety, enough of the kind of what you need to survive in the material world to then think what's next and what's my purpose. So it really is a calling. But it felt like I was going mad. I really felt, what's wrong with me? I've got everything I need to be happy and yet I'm not. I want more. And I was looking around me and I could see people who didn't have that same urge, that same calling, which made me, and I couldn't quite explain. When people say, "Well, what is it that you're unhappy about?" I couldn't really name it. It was so elusive. So there was definitely a feeling of, I'm just going mad here. There's something wrong with me. So that's what I would say to anybody who's in that space is you're not mad. There's something more. I know it's painful, but the encouragement would be to seek community, seek people, that you trust, and to be curious and start to really listen to what is it that's niggling at you. What are you longing for?
I love that. The way that you said to just be curious, and I guess that's where our journey differs. The 30-something was definitely my crisis as well, but it's that curiosity. For me, it was a natural progression
Mm.
into the next step, into the spiritual side, because I had already started exploring that, and I guess that's where our story does change a little bit. But I definitely understand that feeling of, "Yeah, but I should be happy. Look at
Mm.
all the things that I've achieved. Look at, I'm successful. I've done so well for myself. I've got a house, I've got my kids, I've got my dog, my cat,
Mm.
whatever, and I've got this ache
Mm.
inside of me, whether it's in my chest or in my stomach. It's just calling out saying, 'But this is not what I thought it would be like.'" And I think we need to acknowledge that that's actually okay to be in that space. You're not going mad, as you say. And yes, do reach out to people, other people that you trust, whether that's friends, whether that's your community, whether there's people in your network who will be able to identify with that. And I think we as women have a lot of pressure put on us in terms of expectations. What would you say to that, Nathalie?
There's quite a lot I could unpack. I really love that word that you use, the ache. That ache, because that's what
It's true.
that's really how, yeah, I know, I really resonated with that, that ache, that feeling of, it's like an itch that can't be scratched, it's hard to put words to it. And I think the expectation that you talk about, to me, in my experience anyway, is kind of that expectation. I am gonna use the P word, patriarchy. I don't,
Mhm.
I'm not anti-men or anything, but I do believe that we live in a world that is biased towards the masculine, and in my language I use masculine and feminine, not necessarily as male and female, but as energies that are within us. And even though I
I
identified as
like
a
that.
woman, I became aware actually through my studies that I had actually I was devaluing the feminine side of myself, and I was very much in my masculine. And I think to me that is the expectation that we kind of everything to everyone. So we have to fulfill the role of, mother and woman and carer and all of this, whilst also being in the masculine achieving. And that's certainly the feeling that I had growing up, was that I didn't actually have a feeling that there's nothing I couldn't achieve because I was a woman, but it was very much, be independent, look after yourself, um, yeah, be your own man, basically. That my my experience of femininity, if I can use that word, was that it wasn't a pleasant experience. It meant being less than a victim or potential prey. So I just thought, okay, if the female model is like, the helpless princess, thank you very much. I'm just gonna take the role of what I can see is successful in the world, which is the handsome prince, the go-getter, the let's get your own things and not wait for somebody to rescue you. So that's the model that I had adopted, and I do feel that there are a lot of women who have that expectation on them to achieve, to be self-sufficient, to be independent, which is a positive quality. But when it's sort of done out of survival, out of wounding, if that makes sense, from sort of a defense, it becomes an armor. And I think what also happens, again, that's been my experience in society in general, is that we're very disconnected from one another as well. We've become very individualistic. This idea that we're all separate and that, we have to look after our own turf and our own stuff. And it's very fear based. And yeah, and it's very opposite to our nature. So my own experience of going through this, and I think many women that I've spoken to have resonated, is once I ticked all the boxes, I'd been on the traditional quest for success, which is very masculine, that heroic quest. I was suddenly like, do I even want this? I just long for
Yeah.
something grounding, something heart-centered, something about community. And it was that longing for the feminine, whether it's connection with myself, with the earth, with other women, that longing for something more true and meaningful, which again, I feel like as women, we feel in our body. It's a very physical ache of that longing to connect. I don't know if that resonates with your experience. I'd love to. Actually, I'm going to turn interviewer now, but I'd love to hear your how that resonates.
I agree with so much there of
Mm,
what you said, and we could unpack this box so
mm,
much more. You touched on community. If you think about, thousands of years ago, back in those days when we were still living in caves and in huts, we relied on
yeah,
community. People relied on each other, and people were closer essentially because they had to be, because they had to fight off the wildlife
yeah,
and other people potentially coming into the camp. So there was much more of a sense of community, I would suggest. I mean, there's obviously the downsides as well from that life. But if we think about it from the perspective of community, I do believe that there was more of
mm,
that. And I think one of the things that COVID taught us again is how important we all feel, well, should I say that I feel that it is to still have that
mm,
connection with other human beings. And I know we're having a coffee chat here on a call here. It would be absolutely amazing to have this in that real life
mm,
coffee shop, sitting here having, being in the same place, because I know that I long for that. And so when people talk about, AI taking over, I think, "Mm, is it really gonna take over?" Because we still have our humanness, we still have that connection with others. And if we keep that connection, then I think we're gonna be okay. We can make AI work for us. I mean, not necessarily with everything. I do think we have to be careful. But again, from that perspective of community, then that's what we need to reach out for. So if you've got that ache, then acknowledge it. And again, it's about saying, well, what do I need? As women, so often we have to be everything to everybody. You think about the long list of titles that we have. We're a mother, we're a daughter, we're a
mm,
sister, we are, the leader, we're the worker, we're the budgeter, and the list just goes on. There comes a point when I believe that we have to stop and say, hold on a sec, My turn.
What about me? Yeah.
It's time for me to acknowledge me and to really look after myself as well.
Mm,
And this is where I was talking about that kind of conditioning that we have to be everything to everybody.
mm.
Would you what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. It's the simple answer, and I'll try and give you a bit more than that. It's interesting because I never felt myself to be a people pleaser, but I know that's often the archetype that comes in. I just want to be pleasing. So to me, that's not quite how it manifested. It was more of a um, overtaking responsibility. That wanting to control as well. So I think there's different perspective and different way that different women get into that position where we sort of forget ourselves or lose ourselves. And
Oh,
oft
definitely.
Yeah, and often it is out of survival. It's because, the and I talk about women because that's my experience, so I can speak about that with authority, and I believe in the work that I do with women, but I also believe that a lot of what I'm gonna talk about could be equally applicable to men. But to me, it's this idea. So in my book, I actually talk about, archetypes. So I use the metaphor of the Sleeping Beauty as a map for our inner world, and it's a very particularly resonant with my journey, and I know with a lot of women actually who've read it will say, how much it resonates. But this idea that actually there's a part of us, if you think so, I call her the inner princess. In psychology, we also talk about the inner child. Um, Carl Jung talked about the divine child, so also that aspect of
Yeah.
spirituality that I know is important to you, to me. Almost as this idea that it's our essence, our real innocence, our purest essence of being that then has to incarnate into a body and be totally helpless. When we're an infant, we are totally helpless and reliant on other human beings to care for our needs who are not perfect themselves, who, even with the best intentions, will fail us in many ways, which is a good thing in a way, because that's also how we learn to become independent and individual, which we do need to be. It's the paradox, isn't it? It's like we're all at the spirit level, we're all one and we're connected, but at the physical level, we are separate. It's both and. Um, but depending on the level
Just
of
give me 1 sec.
yeah, go for it.
I've just seen, hold on a sec, my charger wasn't charging properly, and
Oh,
I've just been given
yeah.
a notification saying you're almost out of battery. So
Oh,
we're on. Yeah, see, yeah, I thought it was already on, but it's on.
it's
Please,
on
I'm
now
so sorry to
properly.
interrupt, but do continue.
No,
Yeah, well, I
that's
didn't want us to get cut off, that's
no, but
all.
that's exactly, to me, you're almost making my point of, imperfections. Things happen in real life that you can't plan for.
They do.
And that's part of our human limitations. So what I was saying is that depending on the level of letdown, if you will, there may be different levels of wounding, and therefore we might develop certain parts to survive in the environments that we're in to protect us. So the people pleaser, being the good girl, the nice girl, the compliant girl might be one aspect. I mean, to me, it was more the wanting control. So it was, as I said, the more masculine side of me, the planner, the controlling everything, which also in my role as a woman could manifest as yeah, being everything, being the mother, but also being the um, play date organizer, organizers of homework. We just take on everything that there is, and in a way, the husbands just become either another child or just kind of somebody who just sort of doesn't really know where they're fit because we've just got everything in our head. And it's again like everything, there are positive sides to all these parts, but when we rely too much on them and we're driven by them out of fear, we exhaust ourselves. That was my experience. The high achiever, the planner, it's a very, very positive part of me. But when I'm there out of fear, I just end up frazzled, and ultimately we can't control everything. Life will come up in
Yeah.
ways that will show you, you know what, you think you've got control on this. Hang on a minute. I've got another thing coming. And it will force us to just surrender in one way or another.
Nathalie, is so funny what you're saying, and I so identify with that planner, that coordinator. It reminds me of something my dad told me many years ago before he passed, and he said, "If it's not you organizing it, it doesn't happen."
Mm. Yeah.
I thought, it's exactly what you just said. It's something he said to me so long ago. And we in it sometimes we are as you say, we're forced by circumstances even to take on that role. I do like your sleeping queen or your sleeping princess metaphor. And I do believe it's so important for us to have that awakening, even if it can be a little bit of a jolt to what we're so comfortable with, because ultimately it makes us happier
Mm,
and it gives us that deeper sense of satisfaction. And as you say, life does happen,
mm.
and sometimes we do have to just let go, and we can't be everything to everybody and just accept things as they are. So I love that how you've come around to that topic in a lot of ways about that connection with
Mm.
ourselves that we need to really reestablish.
Yeah, because it's that's in psychosynthesis that one of the biggest thing that was a real wow, relief, aha moment, whatever you want to call it, was this idea that we identify with things that are transient. So maybe it's our roles, being a mother, being a leader, as you said, a planner. Maybe it's things, our home, our house, or our relationships, or it could be our body, whatever we identify with that is transient. So, our bodies age, our bodies grow old, our body will fail us in our relationships, and people die, our roles move on, even if you are a mother, children will grow up, eventually leave the nest. And I think that's what happens is when whatever we've been identifying with goes, we then lose that sense of self because we think we are all these things that are actually transient. And psychosynthesis, I mean, when people ask me about psychosynthesis, I always, well, often find it difficult to describe because it's a psychology, it's deeply practical, but it's almost also a philosophy. But this idea that actually beneath all the layers, beneath our mind, our feelings, our bodies, our roles, anything that we attach our consciousness to, there is a deeper, there is still an I. We call it the I. So I can lose if I lose my hand. I don't say I've lost me. I've lost my hand. If I we'd say I've lost my mind, and yet when we identify thoughts or feelings, often we say I am angry. Actually, I feel angry. Anger is transient. So when we peel the layers of all these identification, and there's many ways we can do that. One of them is through meditations or whatever, however people do that. We realize I'm still there. The awareness is still there, and that's the I. And then that awareness can then connect to the higher self, which is the more the. And again, there's different words to it. You can use the word that means something to you, soul, higher self, whatever, but that's that part of spirit that I think we come from, we want to go back to, that was there before we arrived in the body, that will be there after, is always there. And actually that never changes. And when we learn to tap into that, that's when we realize, I'm always safe there. I'm always loved. I'll always be there. So whatever goes on in the mad world that we live in, that we still have to go through in our human journey, I could go back there and really find all the things that I need, deep wisdom, love, belonging, safety, whatever you might find there. But that's my experience. So it's It's funny because when I use the word spiritual, or before I started my journey, I used to have a bit of resistance to that word spiritual because I thought, oh, it's just a bit woo. But actually, it's deeply, deeply in the everyday, in the here and now, deeply grounded. So yeah. Sorry, I'm going off on a on a tangent maybe, but that's where your question took me.
I think it's fabulous how it's taken us around to what we started with. We've started from science, we've moved all the way through to spiritual, and we've covered the in between
Mm,
as well. And how that very practical part of ourselves, as well as the spiritual side, makes us more whole,
mm,
if I can put it that way. If we remember to also, and by the way, when I say spiritual, yes, I did learn in California, I did live in California for a little while, that they called it woo woo. And I thought, oh, I haven't heard that before, but woo woo or the woo, yes, absolutely. I get that. But there is a deeper connection to also our spiritual side, that in our very fast forwarding lives, forced far sorry, goodness, let me get that out. Forward, fast moving lives, that I think I still said that wrong, doesn't matter, that we forget about that side of
mm,
ourselves. We get caught up in the busyness, and I think it's an age thing as well, and you touched on this at the very start. When we get to a certain place in our life, we actually are a little bit more open
mm,
to exploring that. And I love how you talked about men. I was in a networking group only a few days ago, and it happened to be primarily men. And here am I talking about what I do with that spiritual connection. And I had to start the conversation when I introduced myself to say, I know there's a lot of gentlemen in the group, but gentlemen, hear me out, because it definitely applies to someone you know or someone special that is in your life. And one of the gentlemen actually picked me up, and when we had our one-to-one in the networking group, he actually said, actually, everything that you said pretty much applies to me right now where I'm at. And I thought, oh, isn't that interesting? And like you, probably 95% of the clients that I've had have been women.
mm,
And you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean that it doesn't apply
mm,
to men as well. So, gentlemen, if you're tuning into this, please don't tune out, because we know it applies to you as well. It just happens to be the demographic that you and I are both working with, Nathalie, that that that's been our experience,
mm,
but it definitely applies to both genders. And you talked about the masculine and the feminine. And when you talked about the masculine, I totally get that, because even though I am obviously a woman, but I have that masculine side of
mm,
myself, which I think in a lot of ways my dad ingrained in me, be the strong one, be the independent one. You've got to make your way. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And that was kind of like grilled into me. So that was part of my identity, and being able to let that go and to allow more of that softness to come
mm,
forward. Wow, that was a really big shift for
mm.
me.
Yes, it was for me too. I mean, even hearing your word, to just allow the softness, I could feel myself go, and that used to be so difficult. I think I remember that when I first started, it was just, there was a real a desire for this, and yet almost a pathological inability to relax. It's that feeling when you just think, I've got time, and I'm on the sofa, and my mind would go to like list, to do list. What am I supposed to do? Just constantly, because we've been conditioned to be like this, to be on the go. And I think, yeah, often it comes from our fathers, but wherever it's this, I always think about it in a way that it's not malicious. In a way, they were giving us the keys of, how do you succeed in this world that does favor productivity, achievement, results, action. Um, that was my realization when I thought, hang on, I've devalued the feminine in me. It was because I realized qualities that are more, it's like yin and yang, the Chinese concept. Because I know sometimes people react to the words feminine or masculine, thinking it's male or female. But the yang, which is very, driven, action, results, and the yin, which is more, yielding, surrender, softness. I mean, I feel warmth now when I think of these words, but at the time I didn't. Passivity, bleh, or rest. Oh, I used to have a reaction to these, thinking actually I'm not valuing these as much as I am these other more yang quality. And I remember doing yin yoga, so I don't know if you've ever practiced yoga. Um, yeah,
Yes, yes, I'm a fan.
yeah, and there's this particular modality of yoga which is yin yoga, so it's even in the name, yin, which is about,
Well, holding the postures
it's
for longer.
holding the posture. You take the pause, and the challenge is to be still. And it was so hard because I could feel my whole body going, come on, get on with it. So that's what I did for a long time, this sort of just allowing my body to be still and rest and be okay with that softness and allowing and receptivity um and I still, I still have a very strong masculine side. It's not going away, it's not like and I still struggle with that sometimes because I have such a desire to make an impact and to drive things in the world that it drives me. So yeah, I just have to sort of think, oh, hang on, you need time for play. You need time, my inner princess is kind of getting my attention saying, come on, I want to play here, or other parts of me are knocking on my door. So it's about balance. I think I've forgotten your question. Sorry if there was one, but
Oh, I don't think I had one, but it's just lovely how the conversation is just flowing, and I know that there are going to be women, particularly women, but maybe also men who really identify with what we're talking about here. And it is a conversation. It's meant to, maybe ignite a
Mm,
spark in someone or many, hopefully, to go, yeah, what they're talking about really makes sense to me. And you're talking about balance. I mean, you're talking about yin yoga, yes, about keeping poses for longer. I don't know how many people or especially women that I've met who have talked about not being able to do meditation because they just don't know how to quiet that mind, because again, it's that forward moving part of our lives that we become so used
mm,
to. And interestingly enough, the word that comes in for me, and this is where my woo woo side comes in, it's just allowing
mm,
and just being able to trust
mm,
and just saying, okay, well, it will be what it will be,
mm,
and it will be okay. And if it's not okay yet, it will become okay,
mm,
because you talked about this transition. Everything in nature teaches us. If you think about life being a transition, spring goes to summer, goes to autumn, goes to winter. Day turns to night. The moon goes from full to a
mm,
quarter, and everything has cycles. And I do believe that we need to embrace the cycles of life, and really, when we get to that stage where we start questioning, go, "Do you know what? It's time
mm,
for a new cycle,"
mm.
and really embrace that rather than thinking, "Oh my goodness, my identity is gone."
Yeah. I love that
It's
image
just
of
a new cycle.
yeah, and I love the image of the cycle or the circle actually, because that's what a cycle is, a circle, because that's the symbol of the feminine. The circle or the bowl, that
Yes.
receptive, whereas the masculine would be the straight line, the arrow or the sword often. And it's that feeling of when they're in competition or when we see them as separate, it's almost this feeling of and I hear it sometimes in people's languages when they say, "Oh, I feel stuck. I'm going around in circles." So that feeling of stuckness when we are just in the feminine and the whole, as you say, "Oh, I'm just going to surrender and allow," and which is beautiful. When you just have that, it can become unproductive and stale, and when we're just doing the same thing and not moving forward. And equally, the masculine, the linear model, then I certainly had that for the first part of my career, this idea of we climb the ladder and people's languages sometimes say, "Well, I'm taking one step forward, two steps back." You hear that feeling that somehow
Ah, yes.
there's only there's only one direction. And also when we get to the top, then what? And actually, when you combine the two together, the spiral and the circle, sorry, I'm getting a bit nerdy here with a geometry, but it becomes a spiral. Because a spiral, when you look at it from the top, looks like a circle, but when you look at it sideways, it is moving along a linear line. And I thought that was a beautiful
Yeah.
imagery for me about that, about what it means to have masculine and feminine balance. It's not one's better than the other. You don't do one or the other. It's about combining. So yeah, our lives are spirals, and sometimes it will feel like, oh, I've come back full circle. I've come back where I started. Sometimes it's in a similar place physically. Sometimes it's a moment in time, when you go back to a same event or something, and you feel, oh, I've come full circle. And yet you have greater awareness. You're not at the same point as where you started with, because you can look at your life from a different perspective. Um, yeah, so that's the image I want to offer you.
Again, well, it's again something what you've just said there, I can totally relate to because there's a project that I'm involved in, which interestingly enough is something similar but different to
Mm,
what I was doing about 12, 15 years ago.
mm,
It's like, and I have to remind myself too, because I was really doubting, do I go forward with this?
mm,
Because I thought, is it a step back? And the answer in my intuitive mind was, no, it's not, because you are different
mm,
and you've moved along, your own journey. You've got a lot more wisdom, a lot more knowledge. And this time around, when you go into this project, you are looking at it and coming at it from a different person
mm,
and you've got more experience. So, no, it's not going to be the same. So, I would say to people also like you, don't necessarily think of it as a backward step. Think about everything that you've learned along the way and how you can develop this concept. Everything old is new again, right?
mm.
So you
Yeah, and
can
and
you can move forward with that.
yeah, and it's integration. So I know you and I spoke before, so but there's something about usually when that happens is like the circle. That's how I see in my mind that they're spirals that are sort of the circles are going bigger, meaning that you've probably integrated. There's a part of yourself that maybe felt separate before, and now it's almost always coming together. And I've got a greater level of awareness, a greater level of integration, because that's what life wants. I love you used that word earlier, whole. I mean, that just so resonated with that because it's that urge towards wholeness, towards becoming more and more of ourselves, more and more whole. Like when you see nature, you look at the trees, they just want to, the tree just wants to become more of a tree. And sometimes, I mean, I know my scientific mind or my inquisitive mind would always think, what am I meant to do? What's my purpose? And it's like actually just to be more of yourself. Thank you very much. But yeah.
Well, on that note, Nathalie, what advice would you give to any listeners of our video today on the best way if you're finding yourself at a junction, at a transition point? What would be the best advice that you could give to someone who is in that space right now?
Hmm. Well, the first one I've already mentioned is be curious. Be curious and,
Yeah.
well, there's one before that. Be kind to yourself. It's so simple, but I think so many people need to hear it. Often we beat ourselves up for saying, I should be feeling something else that I'm feeling. I should be thinking, we actually are kind and accept this is where I am at. And the second one would be to be curious. I mean, for me, I do this through writing, journaling, to really just be curious, be honest with what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Um, and the curiosity is about listening to what is in you that wants to be expressed. And sometimes it's healing. Sometimes we do need to go back and heal the past. Sometimes it's about taking steps and wandering, exploring. Um, so often, this image of the crossroad, which is very much, it's either or. can paralyze us because we feel like, oh, there's one right way. And what if I make the wrong decision? So instead of that is, I mean, the best questions that's helped me throughout is, what would I really love? So come at it from love rather than fear. And think about what's just the next step that I could take to explore. So you don't have to figure out the whole way. You just need to figure out what's the next step. Maybe it's, I've just always wanted to take a course or explore or go dancing. It's not, that's been my experience. Life doesn't deliver the whole path, illuminated with light saying, ta-da. It's just little nudges, but lean into what gives you joy in life. And if you don't know what that is, just be curious, just start exploring. And find a friend along the way to travel with you. That's the other advice.
I would echo that, and I would add one other, and I'm gonna say just trust,
Mm,
but also trust your intuition a little bit, that feminine side. Just trust that gut, that if you need to do a little bit of nothing, or you need to do a little bit of something here, or something that's totally different, or whatever that is,
mm,
allow the oars to actually be part of the space. Go, well, actually, I've got options.
mm,
Allow yourself to have those options, and all of that is okay. And as you said, you don't have to work it out
mm,
all at once. A lot of the time, these things do unfold quite naturally because, as you say, I mean, you might start dancing and then you go, oh, I really love this. And
mm,
that leads to something else, which leads to something else, or you just stick with the dancing. The oars are actually great
mm,
because oars are options, and oars lead you to that destination of deeper fulfillment.
mm. Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah.
Nathalie, thank you for this wonderful
You too.
opportunity to have this conversation with you. It's just been a beautiful way of allowing things to
Mm.
flow. Thank you for everyone who's listening and watching this video. It's been amazing, and I hope you've really got something out of it. If you have questions for Nathalie or myself, we're going to give you some contact points, but we're also going to put it onto our social media and on YouTube, so you'll be able to see our contact. But for the video, Nathalie, would you like to tell people how they can get in touch with you?
So active mostly on LinkedIn. And I'm on Substack. I write soul seeds. So if you look me up there, but the easiest way is I have a link tree. So it's linktr.ee dash / Nathalie Cordell, and you'll find all the different ways that you can connect with me, whether it's through my website. If you want to order my book, I've got it behind me actually. But yeah, just in case you're interested, because I know you almost mentioned the title, but it is called Awakening the Sleeping Queen. And yeah, and you'll find links to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Substack.
That is awesome. And I'm Dagmar Bryant. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm also on LinkedIn and on Facebook. I also have my Angelic Footprints podcast. If you want to explore especially more about angels, I also have my school group that is SKOOL, and the course is Connecting with Your Angels, totally free if that is something that you would like to explore as one of your oars. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Nathalie, thank
Yeah.
you. I really value your time and your energy for being here. And I hope to connect with you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.